Everyone, if you're here for the Library Millage Town Hall meeting, you have clicked on the correct link. It's been a long road to get here. We thank the 1,500 people who participated in the library survey this summer. We had 28 people who participated in our virtual focus groups. And it is our pleasure to present the City of Troy's first online town hall meeting tonight. So this meeting is being streamed live on AT&T, Comcast, WOW, through our government access cable channel, if all the technology is working as it should be, as well as being streamed live on YouTube, and it's being recorded for replay on all those outlets as well. So for the attendees, your cameras and microphones are off. You will have a chance to ask questions later, but if you're uncomfortable being streamed live and or recorded, leave now. But this is a pretty low risk environment here tonight. We're going to go over introductions and instructions for the town hall meeting tonight, talk a little bit about the library past, present, and future, next steps, and then we're going to answer your questions. So to start off, I'm Bob Bruner. I'm the Assistant City Manager here in Troy, and I have been since June of 2019. Prior to that, I've worked in several other cities, mostly here in Oakland County, and I'll turn it over to my partner, Kathy Russ, to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Russ. I'm your Library Director, and I have been your Library Director since June of 2007. Just a little bit about me. I grew up in Troy. I got my first job at a public library, after the library, and was very honored and flattered to be your library director.
Thanks, Kathy. Now you see we've got our email addresses and phone numbers up here on the screen. If there's anything that requires follow-up after the meeting, please feel free to reach out. You can find this presentation and find our contact information online, other places as well. But hopefully we'll get your questions answered here tonight. If not, we'll talk about more ways to follow up. So the meeting is going to be 90 minutes long. I'm going to start with a presentation, and then we're going to devote as much time as possible to answering your questions. So please hold your questions until the end, and we'll take care of them then. And before we get too much further into this, I want to give you a couple instructions for Zoom. A lot of people have a lot of experience with Zoom at this point and are very knowledgeable and comfortable with it. If you're a little newer to Zoom, you may see near the top of your screen menu where you can adjust your view options, and it's going to change how our faces show up on your screen, as well as how the presentation shows up on your screen. So you go ahead and adjust your view now if you want to do that. I also want to talk about instructions for later on when we get to the Q&A. Like I said, the cameras, microphones, and chat are disabled for attendees tonight. So you'll primarily be hearing from me and Kathy. We have some of our coworkers here to help us moderate questions, ask questions. And we're going to do that using the Q&A feature, which is probably in the bottom of your screen. Again, it's going to depend on what device you're using, but you can see the little menu bar on your screen here. You'll see something that says QA. We're not going to use the raise your hand feature tonight, so don't raise your hand. Then save those questions to the end. When you click on the QA feature, you're going to see a window that looks something like this. It's going to pop up, say welcome. Feel free to ask a question. You type your question in, hit send, and it's going to end up in our question and answer queue. And like I said, we've got some coworkers here with us tonight who are going to help moderate those questions so Kathy and I can answer as many as possible. So with that, are you ready? Here we go. First, I want to tell you a little bit about Library Past. The library was funded through the city's operating millage until the Great Recession. And it was in 2011 that voters first approved as 0.7 mils dedicated library millage. And then that library millage was renewed in 2015. So it's been 10 years since we've had this 0.7 mils dedicated library millage, and it's actually been rolled back. It's now less than 0.7 mils. It was intended to fund library services at the levels back during the Great Recession, which was 6 days a week. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. The current millage expires next year, June 30th, 2021. So what that means is for those of you who pay a tax bill, this tax bill that you paid this year was the last time you're going to pay that dedicated library millage. It's done and it's over, and unless voters approve a new one, there'll be no library millage on your tax bill next year in 2021. So currently, that dedicated library millage is not fully funding operations or maintenance of the library. Just to give you an example, this current fiscal year that we're in, it's the fiscal year that started in 2020 and will end in 2021. So if you see the shorthand on the screen, FYE, that means fiscal year ending. So then the fiscal year that's going to end next year in 2021, we're budgeted to collect $3.7 million in library revenue, but we're budgeted to spend 4.1. So that $400,000 shortfall is going to come out of the library's fund balance, which is basically like the savings account or the rainy day fund, people might call it. And it's going to leave that library fund balance less than $28,000. So basically, no money left in the library piggy bank, so to speak. And then as far as maintenance goes, the city's capital projects fund paid for renovations and roof replacement in the last fiscal year. That was $1.1 million or $1.2 million, sorry. And that capital millage is a separate millage, separate from the city's operating millage and the library millage. And then in this current fiscal year, there was another $228,000 of maintenance that was deferred due to lack of funds. So current library millage just not keeping up with the operations or the maintenance cost of the library. So let's talk about what the future may hold for the library. We've got November 3rd, 2020 ballot question. That's what we're here to talk about tonight. And the question is basically, shall we have a dedicated library millage of 1.1 mils for 10 years? And so first I want to talk about what that would mean for the Troy Public Library if it's approved. So there's three main things that the new library millage would provide, and that is to restore 7-day service, perform building maintenance, and implement some upgrades. So let's talk a little bit more about that. The 7-day service, like I said, back during the recession, service was reduced from 7 days to 6 days, and hours were reduced from 65 hours a week to 55 hours a week. And that occurred effective July 1st, 2010. And again, July 1st, that's the day the city's fiscal year starts. So it's been 10 years of reduced service. New library millage would allow us to restore 7-day service and increase hours back to 65. Building maintenance, this is not very exciting stuff to the average library patron. We've got our heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system that needs to be replaced. Other examples that may be a little more obvious to visitors are window replacement and elevator repairs. Both the windows and the elevator are original equipment dating back to 1984. 1984 was when the library was expanded to its the size that it is today. Prior to that, the area of the library that the youth services area currently occupies, that was built in 1971. And prior to 1984, that was the whole library. So it's really two buildings in one. As far as upgrades go, furniture replacement is at the top of the list because most of that furniture is original equipment dating back to 1971. or 1984, depending on what part of the building that you're talking about. And other examples include study rooms, dedicated teen area, establishing a makerspace. These are the kind of upgrades that library patrons most frequently request, and the upgrades that we'll be implementing if the new library millage is approved. So this table, this is hot off the press today. So thank you to everyone who's joining tonight. You're getting to see this even before the mayor and city council get to see it. This came out of a question that we received via email, and somebody asked basically, what are the funding levels of the other libraries in Oakland County? So this information comes to us from the Library of Michigan. They collect statistics every year. And what we did here is we looked at all the Class 5 and Class 6 libraries in Oakland County. Class 6 is the largest libraries in Oakland County, and Troy Public Libraries, or I should say, Class 6 is the largest class in the statewide. This is how libraries are measured. And TPL is a Class 6 library. Class 5 serves communities a little bit smaller, but there's 17 of them in Oakland County. So you can see in 2018-19, the operating income per capita, where Troy ranked, was 12 among the 17 libraries at $44 per person. And this is the most recent year data is available for. So what I did is I calculated, well, what would have been Troy's rank if the Troy Public Library had 1.1 mils at that time. And you see the answer here on the right side. Troy would have ranked 7th out of 17 at $68 per capita in the top 9. So looking at the top libraries, Bloomfield Public Township, Baldwin Public Library, that's the library in Birmingham that serves Birmingham, Bloomfield Hills, Bingham Farms, Beverly Hills, and Southfield, West Bloomfield, Farmington. The rest are pretty straightforward. I'm going to leave that there so you can kind of look at that for a second, because like I said, this is first time anybody's getting to see this. And this will be posted on the library website after we're done tonight. All right, so we've talked a little bit about what approval will mean for the library. Let's talk about what it means for the taxpayer. $1.1 mils equates to about $12 a month for the average residential Troy taxpayer. That's based on average taxable value of $130,000. So here you see how that compares to some streaming services that you may already be subscribing to. And TPL has a lot to offer in terms of books, audiobooks, movies, music, magazines. So this is intended to kind of help put that cost in perspective with some other things you may be spending money on. This is another side-by-side comparison, and instead of comparing the funding level per capita, here we're comparing the average residential library tax. So back in 2019, again, the most recent year data is available, the average Troy taxpayer paid $85 for library services, which ranked 17 out of 22. And it's 22 because there's 22 cities, villages, and townships in Oakland County that levy a dedicated library tax. That's a different number than actual number of libraries. Because like I said, places like Birmingham, Bloomfield Hills share libraries. Same is true with Clarkston and Independence Township, Farmington, Farmington Hills. So different number of communities than libraries. So on this list, we have Troy ranking at 17 out of 22 back in 2019 with the millage rate at that time. If Troy had had the 1.1 mil millage rate at that time, average taxpayer would have paid $137, which would have ranked Troy 6th in between Farmington Hills and Orion Township. And this graphic is on the library website, so if you haven't seen it already, you can check it out there. Speaking of the library website, here's the Library Decision 2020 page. And if you notice near the bottom left, there's a big orange arrow and a circle around the library millage estimator, because we could sit here all night and talk about what this means for the average taxpayer, but we've created a tool that you can use to figure out what it actually means for you. And that is our library millage estimator. All you have to do is click on that link, and it's going to take you to a page on the city's website, and you type in your address, click estimate taxes, and you're going to get some results that look like this. Now, before we talk about the results, Kathy, you want to tell the folks why we chose 4816 Carroll?
Sure. 4816 Carroll is my old house. My parents lived in that house for 40 years. That's the house I grew up in, and I was very curious to see what the tax increase would be if I were still living in that house. So that's why that house is good.
So if you happen to live at 4816 Carroll, we're not picking on you. We just chose that address because Kathy had a connection to it. So when you get your results from the library millage estimator, you'll see the taxable value for the home, which in this case is $112,280, a little bit below the average. Like I said, the average is about 130 citywide, but that's pretty close to the average. And so you can see here, the first line shows what the estimated taxes will be next year, based if that 1.1 mil is approved. And so we've got $124 for the year, or about $10 a month. And then it also shows us, well, what were the actual total city taxes this year, 2020, when the city's total tax rate was 9.9991 mils. It was $1,123, and we can estimate next year, if the library millage passes, what would the taxes be? $1,127. And you notice there's only a $4 difference between 2020 taxes and 2021 taxes, and that's because not only is the old library millage expiring, but the city's debt millage is expiring too. So once you get your results on the library estimator, you're going to see this information here that's unique to your address, but you're also going to see this information here, which explains more about how the city's millage rate is changing next year. So, like I said, when you go to the library estimator page, this is all going to show up for you. I broke it up onto 2 slides here, so that you might be able to read it, although the print is pretty fine. But the point here is tonight is to let you know this information's out there, and you should go get it as soon as we're done. So this is a visual illustration of what that's trying to explain. You can see here the total city millage has been steadily declining since 2015. Like I said, 2020, it was 9.9991. And next year, if voters approve the new library millage, it's estimated to be 10.0386. So it would be a pretty modest increase. It wouldn't be a full 1.1 mil increase. All right. So last but not least, I'm going to talk about what will happen if the ballot question is not approved and there is no library millage. Well, it's pretty simple. There's no library millage. There's no library budget. The current library millage generates about $3.5 million annually, and it's unlikely that the city could reduce general fund spending on other things like public safety to replace that lost revenue. So it really boils down to no library millage and no library budget. What it would mean to taxpayers is that the average taxpayer would have an $85 tax decrease But along with that, there's also potential loss of property values due to the lack of library services. Showed you on the tables all the other communities in Oakland County that have library services. And so that's something that could be negatively impacted if service is no longer available here in Troy. So next steps, visit the Troy Public Library 2020 Millage page to get more information. I suspect that if you're joining us online tonight, you've probably been there and seen the information. If you have questions, please email them to librarydecision2020@TPL, troypl.org. That's email distribution, and copy will go to me and Kathy and some other members of our team. We've been busily answering those questions coming in. So if there's questions that don't get answered here tonight, it's another resource for you. And then once you've done your research and had all your questions answered, you can vote absentee. Starting next week, the city clerk's office is going to be sending out absentee ballots. I also want to let folks know that in addition to the drop boxes here at City Hall, we're going to have drop boxes at both the Troy Public Library and the Community Center. So for folks who choose to vote absentee, encourage you, if you can, to get that ballot to a drop box rather than putting it in the mail. If you have to mail it in, so be it. We've got some exciting new ballot tracking technology that we're going to be using this year. But want to let you know that we've got new drop boxes being installed next week as well. So that'll be available to you. And for those of you who want to vote in person, you can do that too. We still vote in person on November 3rd at all 31 polling locations in the city of Troy, all the normal places. And the city clerk's office is working. They're actually here now down the hall, stuffing ballot envelopes and working to prepare for the election. And a big part of that is making sure that the election inspectors have the PPE that they need and hand sanitizer and all the supplies necessary to make sure that voting in person is safe for everyone who wants to go cast their vote on election day. So with that, it's time to turn it over to you, the viewers, for questions and answers. And I see we have some questions that have been coming in. And like I said, we've got Cindy and Stephanie who are going to help go through the questions and pose them to me and Kathy for answering. So Cindy and Stephanie, who's going to go first tonight?
I'm going to go first tonight. So we have 3 questions from Max G. Do you want them all at one time?
One at a time, please.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do the first one. So referencing operating income, what is the comparison based on number of households in Troy who pay taxes? We may have more residents than other cities.
The operating income number is based on operating income divided by the number of people that the library serves. It's not based on households. I believe it's based on population. Kathy, you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you covered that.
Okay, then the second question, have we looked at collaborating or sharing resources with other libraries?
I can answer that one. We actually do a lot of resource sharing right now. Troy Public Library participates in MelCat, it's a system called MelCat, which is a statewide interlibrary loan system that allows us to borrow materials from other libraries. No one library can have absolutely every book, DVD, CD, audiobook, and so forth. So we participate in that system so we can acquire materials for our residents from other libraries. The Troy Library is also a member of the Suburban Library Cooperative, which is a cooperative of 21 libraries. And from the cooperative, we receive delivery for those interlibrary services. We also receive, the cooperative negotiates group discounts on our behalf and on behalf of the libraries that are in the cooperative. So we receive discount rates on the purchase of library materials. So instead of paying, what you would pay at Barnes & Noble when you buy a book, we receive a discounted rate, so we can make those dollars stretch for us. So, not necessarily 2 books for the price of 1, but we can get materials at a discounted rate. We also have reciprocal borrowing with other libraries that border Troy, so that's why you can go to Rochester and check out materials from there. So necessarily waiting for a book to come to you from Traverse City, you can go to the other libraries in the area. In terms of resource sharing, that's what we do. In terms of services, I'm not sure what is actually meant beyond that by the question, so I think I'll leave it at that before I muddy the waters. But if there's a follow-up, I'm glad to answer that.
Okay, next question. Also for Max G, have we looked at who all are included in average residential library tax?
Okay, so the way I calculated that is that the city has, this is actually from state equalization reports that you can find on the county website. And so the city has several different kinds of property. There's commercial property, industrial property, residential property. And so you take the total taxable value for the city of residential property and you divide that by the number of residential parcels. And that tells you what the average value of a residential parcel is. And that's how that number is calculated. And then you just you divide that number by 1,000 and multiply it by 1.1, and that gives, or whatever millage, and that gives you the average residential tax.
From Tom and Chris, what did the expiring debt millage pay for, and will that millage need to be renewed?
I thought somebody might ask that question, and the answer is that I'm so new and the debt millage is so old, I don't want to try to explain that tonight. It goes back quite a ways. We can post more information about that online. But there are no immediate plans to replace that debt millage. Any new millage would have to go on the ballot and be approved by voters in the future. So City Council hasn't taken any action to put any other millages on the ballot, but that's something that could happen in the future. But again, voters would have to approve it.
Okay, next question. Why is 1.1 the only option on the ballot? Why not 0.7 or 0.9 millage?
Another good question. I can tell you 0.7 is just not enough because of what we talked about earlier. That current 0.7 mils is just not providing enough revenue.
So there you go.
Yeah. It's not generating enough revenue to keep the library open even 6 days a week, 55 hours. 8 mils wouldn't do that. 9 mils would be barely enough to do it. So City Council actually looked at 0.9, 1, 1.1, and 1.2. And the survey included, I believe, 0.9 and 1 and 1.1. And so when we asked folks, what they wanted and what they were willing to pay, 1.1 seemed to be the sweet spot. And keep in mind, every tenth of a mil plus or minus it doesn't make a huge difference in the taxes that you're actually going to pay.
I think what's also important to note, as Bob mentioned, a 0.9 millage rate covers the library operations in its current state, 6 days per week. And the term of the proposed millage is 10 years. So if the millage rate were 9.9 for 10 years, that would not cover library operations through that 10-year period. 1.1 was also discussed, and the library, and this is something that I think if you have Bob and I could answer that via an email a little bit easier. But the library is subject to heavy rollback, as Bob mentioned in the beginning of the presentation. The millage, the voted millage is 0.7, but the actual millage that the library derives is about 0.68 and some change. So, so if the millage were one mil for 10 years, we would still be subject to heavily, and there would be the possibility that would last for the duration of 10 years. So, council opted to go with 1.1. If you are interested in that discussion or the discussions that led up to the decision, please do visit the library millage website, because there are links to all of those discussions. There are links to the memos that Bob and I wrote to provide information to council. And again, you can watch the meetings where the council discussed this.
I want to say one more thing about millage rates is that the millage is only one half of the equation. It's the taxable value and the millage together determine what people are going to pay. And the average residential property in Troy, the value is much different than it might be in Bloomfield Township or Pontiac. So when we worked with the city council to figure out what the right millage would be, we really looked at what the average residential taxpayer was going to be paying, as well as what the needs of the library were. And there was a very strong desire from the survey results to restore 7-day service and to update the facility. So that's how we ended up at the 1.1 mil.
Kathy, could you make sure your mic is closer to your mouth?
How about now? Is that good?
Better. From Richard, how will the new millage improve the competitiveness of the Troy Library compared to nearby towns?
Well, let's talk about that from a financial perspective. That's probably the easier thing to look at. Back to this table. With the old millage rate, again, this year it was 0.6884 mils. That generated $44 for every person that the library served. And again, that's 12 out of 17. So if the new millage rate is approved, the library is going to have more money to spend on providing services. So if that's what you mean by competing with other libraries, is being able to provide more and better services, then it's going to significantly increase the Troy Public Library's ability to do that. So is anything you want to add?
No, I appreciate everything you said. I guess specifically, it means the library would be open 7 days, as is the Bloomfield Township Library, the Baldwin Public Library, West Bloomfield Township Public Library, and so forth. We have been asked many times over the last several years about study rooms and about maker spaces, about a new teen area. Those are 3 examples. We would be able to provide that. There are several libraries that have maker spaces. There are several libraries that have dedicated teen areas. There are several libraries that have study rooms. So I guess in terms of services, we would come into parity with some of those other libraries.
Okay, next question is from Susan. Can you explain why part of the millage is captured for the brownfield redevelopment?
Yes, I can. It's a state law is the short answer, and excuse me. The Brownfield Redevelopment Authority is going to get a whole $5,000 basically out of the library fund revenue. I think it's $5,275 without looking it up. But 5 years ago, when the last library millage was approved, state law required that the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority the Downtown Development Authority and the Local Development Finance Authority all got to what's called capture the library tax revenue for those areas. There's a change in state law which allowed the city to opt out of the DDA capture and the LDFA capture, but not the BRA capture. So don't worry about keeping up with that alphabet soup. But long story short, the city is legally required to capture money for the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. The amount that's actually going to be captured out of the library fund is less than $6,000. And the reason that we are doing it is because it's a state law and it can't be avoided. And it's also state law mandates that language be included in the ballot question, which is probably why you're asking the question.
Next question is from Judy. Define average residential taxpayer.
Okay, explained this once before. Average residential tax is calculated by taking the value of all the residential properties in the city, several $1 billion worth, dividing it by the number of residential parcels, which is several thousand, and that's your average residential taxable value.
The next question is from Susanna. Will there be full and part-time library positions when we have a 7-day library?
The answer is yes. We actually currently do have full and part-time positions, and we would continue that.
The next question is from Dowd. I like Bill's inquiry. There is much marketing about the millage itself, which is fine. I was wondering if the library's services could be neatly summarized. I understand the financial arguments. I'm looking for the utility argument. So far, I've heard mainly an appeal to my pocketbook respectfully.
I think the question is asking, about library usage. So pre-COVID, the library checked out approximately 1.2 million items per year. And that is with 6-day service. That is actually exceeding many libraries that are open 7 days. So the library is very busy, is heavily used. We saw an annual, about 2,500 people through the door per day, and our program attendance for youth, teen, and adult programs is approximately 35,000 attendees per year. So if those types of statistics are what you're looking for, I hope that answers that question. But if you'd like to do a follow-up, I'm happy to provide more information.
Okay, the next question is from Robin. Are there any provisions in the millage for funds to actually have full-time employees at the library? Only being able to offer part-time positions seems to greatly affect the library's ability to retain librarians. Because of this, the library seems to spend a lot of time on staff training instead of being able to focus more on programming and the community.
Bob, are you okay if I take that one?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Yes, that is very much a part of the millage, the proposed millage. So we can address that. Part of the reason why the library has staffing issues is because approximately 89% of the library staff is part-time. We constantly move staff to other libraries. Other libraries pay, I think Troy Library pays a good wage. However, the Troy Library does not offer any sort of time benefits, such as paid vacation or paid sick time. Essentially, if employees do not work, they are not paid. Whereas other libraries in the area, Rochester, Birmingham, Bloomfield do pay prorated time benefits. So we often lose part-time staff to part-time jobs. However, we also lose part-time staff to full-time jobs at other libraries. We hire great people and we train them, and they have exposure to many different situations of great community, of supportive community, and educated community. They have they gain a variety of experience, and then they use that to interview very well for a full-time job. So part of the part of the money derived from the millage increase would go to adding some full-time positions. I also want to mention that those full-time positions would help us to go out into the community more, not just have people come to the library. We could do more technology training. We could do more community engagement, more community outreach. I also have supervisors who are supervising between 15 and 25 employees. Adding a few more full-time positions will allow us to distribute that supervisory load and not have such high numbers of part-time staff only being supervised by one person. That contributes to a lot of internal organizational issues, and we would address that.
Next question from Helen. If the library is closed, will we still be able to use other libraries in the area? It's my understanding that we have to have a library to use other libraries and take advantage of sharing.
The answer to that question is yes and no. It is a local library decision on whether they sell non-resident library cards. So Rochester Public Library, Birmingham Library, Bloomfield Township Library will not sell a library card to a non-resident if that non-resident does not have a library in the community. So for example, if the Troy Public Library closed, and this was a discussion back in 2010, if the Troy Public Library closed and Troy taxpayers were not supporting a library, they would not be able to purchase a card from Rochester, Baldwin, Bloomfield. Those are three. There are others under any circumstances because those libraries do not sell library cards. Boston Public Library, Royal Oak Public Library, Madison Heights Public Libraries, basically many of the municipal libraries, will sell non-residents a library card, but the non-resident can expect to pay a higher rate, a rate higher than the average tax or than the highest paying taxpayer in that community. So let me explain that. If there's someone in Clawson who's paying $350 a year for library service, and Clawson's going to charge a Troy resident $400, because you cannot have a system where a non-resident pays less than a resident. So, so the answer is yes, you can purchase cards at some libraries, and no, you cannot purchase cards at other libraries. And the cost will be variable depending on the community.
Next question is from Richard. Do you think it's a good idea to return the library to be funded through the regular city budget rather than a separate millage? Don't other cities fund their libraries through their regular city budgets?
No and no. I don't think it would be a good idea because the city would have to cut spending in other areas. And 55% of the budget is public safety. And also, just looking at the tax table I showed you of all the other communities that pay a dedicated library millage, we're not unique. All these other, like I said, there's 22 communities, cities, villages, and townships that pay a dedicated library millage. There are very few libraries left that are funded out of a city's general fund. So that was a result of the Great Recession in large part. If you go back 10, 15 years, yeah, Troy Public Library was funded out of the general fund, as were some others. But that's not the case anymore. And it's especially not the case for larger libraries like Troy Public Library, which is a Class 6 library, one of the largest in the state.
Next question from Judy. Will the library be closed from now through November 3rd?
The answer to that question is I don't know. I hope not, but I don't know. As I guess we didn't get into it tonight, but as I have mentioned, I wrote a letter that was in Troy today, and I believe that there's an article in the Troy Times this week, and I know I've answered several emails explaining why the building is currently closed, and that is because right now in our circulation department, I have 6 part-time staff members doing the work of 14, normally done by 14. We are working on filling those positions. Just to give you an example of why it is taking so long, we identified 6 candidates that we wanted to interview. We asked them to take a skills test to make sure that they can alphabetize things and put numbers in order. And of the 6 people we invited to take the test, 2 took the test, 1 failed the test, which left us a candidate pool of 1 person to interview. So I understand that it seems to be taking a long time, and that's part of the reason why. So I cannot put a date on it at this point in time, because if I give you a date and I'm incorrect in that date, then you will be even more angry with me. And so I really can't answer that question at this time.
Okay, so Tom and Chris Hill are just looking for a bit of clarification. They said, just to be clear, I believe your slide showed that the average annual property tax bill in Troy will go up by only about $5 per year if this millage is approved.
Yep.
Well, I would suggest check out the library millage estimator for your own specific results. If I was still living at 4816 Carroll Drive, my tax bill would go up by $4, but your tax bill might be even less, might be a little bit more. So please do check out that estimator for your own specific information.
Yeah, the average residential taxable value in Troy this year is $129,153. And so based on the average, that's correct. The average taxpayer is going to be $4, but you know, your results may vary, and definitely visit the website to find out for yourself.
From Richard, does having a good library improve real estate values in a community?
Yes. Interestingly, I did my master's thesis when I was in graduate school on the effects on a community when a library closed. Now, this was before Troy Public Library's millage issues of 2010. So, so my research, you know, is prior to that. But basically, having a vibrant library in your community does contribute to your property values. Communities that don't have libraries or have closed their libraries do see a decrease in property values. They see a decrease in their business community, and juvenile crime tends to go up. So those are just a few things that that I learned when I did that research.
Next question is from Susan. Can you explain why it doesn't make sense to fund the library out of the operating general fund?
I'll take a shot at that again. The short answer is the operating millage doesn't generate enough money to pay for the library. That's why voters approved the dedicated library millage 10 years ago, and that situation hasn't changed. Although, you know, the economy has improved, you know, in general ways. The way city finances work is that those losses from the Great Recession are basically locked in. So of all the cities in Oakland County, the average city tax bill is about $1,800 just for the city portion of the tax bill. In Troy, it's about $1,300. So Troy is well below the county average for taxes, and that's why the operating millage just can't support the library anymore. And like I said before, that is the rule now and not the exception. When you look around Oakland County and see all the other communities that have library millages, that's just the way it is now.
And I think, as a resident, a former resident, because I have learned a lot about this as well. If the city took $3.5 million out of its budget every year and gave it to the library, and of course that cost would go up as utility costs go up, as staffing costs go up, and so forth. That would be $2.5 million that it would not be able to devote to something else. So I think then you are in a sort of a robbing Peter and paying Paul, if you will, type of situation. And that was a lesson that I learned back in 2010.
In 1998, audio-visual moved to youth services and adult services. Will meeting rooms replace audio-visual when the millage passes? That's from Susanna.
I'm not sure I understand the question, but the library has a meeting room and it has a conference room, and we keep, you know what? I'm sorry. I think I do. The library's current meeting room formerly was what was called the audio-visual room. When I worked in circulation in the 90s, the audio-visual collection was housed all in one place in that space that is currently the meeting room. But at some point, and I'm sorry that I don't know when, the decision was made to take all of the materials out and put the adult materials in the adult section and the youth materials in the youth section, and turn that space into a meeting room.
Okay, next question from Max. Has the city looked at evaluated increasing millage for parcels who want to use 7-day service, pay for the service, and leaving millage for others at 0.68 use for fewer days? At 1.1, millage revenue will be 5.9 million versus 3.7 currently. 2.5 million increase. That's a huge increase. Why is maintenance not paid from capital projects fund for future? Suggest reducing hours to 55 to 40 or even 0 with no millage increase. Please evaluate setting up everything online with 0.25 millage given this pandemic.
Okay, so there's a few pieces to that. The easiest one is that you can't have a different millage rate for different parcels. Millages are levied citywide, so we can't tax some people 0.8 mils and other people 1.1 mils. And we already talked about the process that the city council went through to arrive on the 1.1 mils. And that's the ballot question that's on the ballot in November. And there won't be another ballot question on the ballot in November because those ballots are printed and they're down the hall in the city clerk's office. So as far as evaluating other options, maybe that's something we would do if this one fails. As far as the capital fund not paying for all the maintenance and so forth, again, the city has more capital needs than it has capital funds. The city doesn't get to levy and collect as much tax as the city council's heart desires. The city council is restrained by the Headley Amendment to the Michigan Constitution and Proposal A, which also amended the Constitution. And so, there's a lot of very specific laws that govern how property taxes are levied and collected. And basically, the city is already levying the maximum that it can for both the general fund operating millage and the capital millage. And unfortunately, that's not enough money to meet all the city's needs.
And to that, I would add that the minimum that can be levied in order to keep any public library, an accredited library, is 0.3 of a mil, so 0.3. So I think the question had referenced 0.25. So what does 0.3 of a mil get you? Why do we care about accreditation? That allows us to participate in the MELCAT system and acquire materials for patrons from other libraries. And as I mentioned, no one library can afford everything. That allows us to keep our membership in our cooperative. That gets us those discounts that we can use to purchase materials and supplies that stretch those dollars. So if any community levies less than 0.3 mils, that library is not accredited, so they do not derive those benefits. So I just want to make sure that I threw that in.
Next question from Tom and Chris. What library services are currently being offered while the building itself is closed?
So the library is offering digital services 24/7, and actually we have seen an increase of about 40%. Actually, let me pull that up. Let me find that. So we are operating at, I'm sorry, I have this on a couple of different pages, but our circulation of our digital materials has increased about 30% over what it was pre-COVID. So that's good to know that people are using those digital services. The library is also offering curbside pickup of items. So patrons can place holds on materials. We will retrieve those holds and we will bring them out to your car. We are also providing in a variety of ways reference services, which include browsing. We understand that people do enjoy browsing the collection. However, we can help with that. It's just browsing the collection in a different way. If you don't want to talk to a librarian, we have various tools online, and you can do that. We're also starting a series of videos to introduce new books to people. Youth Services is doing a lot of homework and ready reference and tutoring the way that we would provide in person. So I will say that although it is in a different way, we are providing the services that we do provide when the building is open. The only service that we are not providing in any form currently is computer usage. We are also providing digital programs. Our program attendance has skyrocketed, which we're very pleased about. And our youth services programs, our story times, and our craft programs, and the education programs that we offer to children, the attendance has also skyrocketed there. And we are working with the school district to provide digital resources to children because we understand that they're in a digital learning environment and most are learning from home. So I hope that that answer to your question, but I'm happy to follow up if you have any follow-up.
Okay, next question from Susan. Why can't libraries simply charge a usage fee versus paying for it out of our taxes?
Well, it's a state law. Libraries are established to run, and however a public library is established, whether it's a department of the city or it is a township library like Winfield Township or an independent library, it is state law that libraries are funded by public tax dollars. So I think what's important to keep in mind that even if it were, say, a subscription library, that it would be difficult to keep services at a stable level, because if one year you had 1,000 people subscribe and the next year you had 500 people subscribe and then the following year you had 2,000 subscribe, your income is going to fluctuate, and therefore your services and your availability of hours will also fluctuate.
Kathy, I have a different way to answer that question. And my answer is that those places exist and they're called bookstores. And a lot of those are going out of business.
Next question. Due to current government standards, it is very possible the library will be closed for feasibly another year. Can we visit the millage issue next year?
Kathy?
Well, I don't anticipate that the library will be closed for another year. However, the expires June 30th of 2021. So it is my understanding as an employee of the Troy Public Library that if this millage is not replaced, that the Troy Library has no funding and the library would then, operations would cease.
Yeah, Kathy, I think the point that we need to make here is that even though the library is closed to the public, the library is not closed. Staff is still working and delivering both digital services and curbside services. So assuming folks want those things to continue, then there needs to be a new library millage next year. Now, if we were to have to shut down the library for some period of time completely, no millage, no staff, no nothing, then there would be a lot of costs associated with starting it back up again, such as rehiring all the employees and that sort of thing. So although the library is closed to the public, it's not closed, and there are costs that are continuing to occur even during the pandemic.
And I guess, just the way that, and I do understand where this person is coming from, but the way that I look at it is that, what's going on with COVID and with the library, the building not being open is a short-term problem. The question of the library's continuing existence is a longer-term issue. So, the library, at some point, COVID will end, and hopefully things will go back to normal. And at that point, we would hope that there would be a library.
Our next question is from Robin. Are there say yes to the library millage yard signs available anywhere?
We are not able to advocate as city employees, so we don't have anything to do with that. I believe that there is, that the Friends of the Troy Public Library may be working on that. So if you have, if you need contact information, I suggest you go to the Friends of the Troy Public Library website, and they would be happy to answer that question for you.
Next question from Susanna. Could we have limited patrons for browsing materials with wearing masks and social distancing and 6 feet apart when the library buildings open to the public?
Yes, and that is the plan. We would have browsing times. The library, just to let you know, the library is subject to the governor's executive order on capacity limits. So at any given time in youth services, we would be able to have 61 people, and in adult services, 122 people. So because of this, we will have to enforce time limits and capacity limits because we are not able to have more people than those numbers in the building. So, when the time comes, that system will be in place.
Okay, and our next, well, it's more of a comment, is from Richard. He says if you Google Headley Amendment, you can find all of the history, and he just wanted everybody to know.
Property taxation is a complicated thing, and you know, it's like asking somebody what time it is, and that person trying to explain how to build a clock. So this is complicated stuff. We've tried to make it as easy to understand as possible. So thank you for that, Richard, and please, the folks watching, if you have more questions on some of the more technical aspects, feel free to send us an email.
And we have a comment from Susan. There will be signs. There is a ballot committee who is distributing signs when they are printed.
Okay, and our next question is from Max. If bookstores are going out of business, then why are we even trying to keep the library afloat? Why don't residents use Amazon Prime services instead of an annual fee for an annual fee? Online options will be much more cost effective, and isn't that what we should suggest?
Let me answer that question this way, Max. You don't have to vote yes. You can vote however you want. You know, the slide that I'm sharing shows what other cities and villages and townships are spending on their libraries, and I think it would put Troy at a competitive disadvantage if it did not have a library when people are deciding, you know, where they want to move, where they want to live. You know, the library is some part of that. So, you know, do the research, see what other communities are doing, and make up your own decision. But we're not here to debate the virtues of Amazon versus the Troy Public Library.
Well, I am.
You can, Kathy.
Well, and I guess I would say that, you know, Max, I appreciate that, and I use Amazon too. But what I see people using the library for is not just books. I see young families coming and bringing their children to story time for, you know, literacy purposes and for connection. You know, people who may be new to the community who are, you know, interested in, you know, making friends and you know, having their children learn things. I see the meeting rooms are heavily used by community groups. I see teens studying. I see any number of uses for the library that, to the best of my knowledge, Amazon doesn't provide. And I think that, you know, from my perspective as the library director, my job is to serve the entire Troy community. And as I mentioned, 1.2 million items were checked out last year, which tells me that, you know, if items go out to people's homes and come back, people are using their libraries. So I think that there are, you know, many different opinions on this topic, and I'll leave it at that.
And we have a lot of people, we've heard it tonight, we've heard it before, a lot of people asking, you know, when is the library going to open to the public? Why isn't it open to the public? So certainly there are folks out there in the community that want to go back to the library and want that available.
And the last question, I'd put it up there. But Richard has a question. Library also had interesting speakers in the meeting rooms for our community, and you can't get that from Amazon. Thank you, Richard.
And thank you. And I would mention too, you know, we're not able to have speakers in the meeting rooms these days. So we do continue that virtual programming. We've had a lot of interesting speakers for adults and for teens and for kids. So we are trying to continue library service in this environment to the best of our ability. So please do check that out. If that was interesting to you before, I hope you find it interesting now.
So I think I'm looking ahead, and it seems like the next several questions in the queue aren't questions, but arguments in favor of having a library, which I appreciate, but that's not what we're here for tonight. Tonight's for questions and answers. So because it came up earlier, and we have a few more minutes here, I want to go ahead and really nerd out with you about taxable value and where that comes from and how it's calculated. So let me see. Can you? I think I'm sharing the Oakland County website now. Can folks see that? Is that on the screen, Kathy or Stephanie?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Mhm.
So Oakland County has every year, required by law, this thing called the Equalization Report, and the Equalization Report has the values, the taxable values for all the cities, villages, and townships in the county. So what you do is you download that report if you're brave, and you can see this is page. Can you see page 30 of the analysis of by class of real property valuations by cities? Okay, so here's Troy. Troy had total residential real taxable value of $3.5 billion, and that's 27,291 parcels. So you just divide $3.5 billion of taxable value by the number of parcels. That tells you what the average taxable value of a residential parcel is. So, part of my job with the city is to, do a lot of research and prepare reports and do things like this. And I always try to do it in such a way that it's available from public sources. So if somebody wanted to go out and it's kind of like science, when you do an experiment, somebody's got to be able to replicate your results. And so I'm always looking at information from public sources so that folks can replicate my results if they so choose. But you'd have to have a lot of time on your hands and a deep interest of public finance in order to do so. But since that question came up a couple times, that's where it comes from. It's publicly available sources, and it's just math. It's not any city voodoo or anything like that.
Any other questions?
No, they're all comments.
Should we do a last call for questions? Just so you all know, comments are not seen by the participants. They are only seen by the moderators.
Someone did say thank you for putting the town hall together. It was very helpful.
It was our pleasure.
Glad to do it. Like I think I mentioned earlier, when we did the focus groups back in July, we had a lot of feedback from the residents who participated in the focus groups that they really enjoyed being able to participate and provide input in that way. And so, maybe that's an example of, one of the good things coming out of the pandemic. Under normal circumstances, we'd probably do this kind of thing live, and people would have to get in their cars and come to the library or city hall in order to participate. But this way, everybody can participate from home in their pajamas or whatever. It makes it more convenient. Makes it a little more trying for us to deal with the technology, but hopefully that's gone relatively well tonight.
Well, I understand that my audio has been garbled, which is why I'm turning my head because I understand that it's better when I go this way. So I apologize for that, and we'll work on that and have it fixed by October 1st.
Yeah, so this would be a good time to remind folks that if you have friends or neighbors in Troy who did not participate tonight, we had 65 registered, but I think only 33 actually participated. Unfortunately, I don't think Zoom, I don't know, but I don't think Zoom sends out reminders to folks who have registered. I'm not sure about that. But if you have friends and neighbors, if you enjoyed what you saw tonight, tell them to catch the replay on Government Access Television or on YouTube, or register, because we're going to do this again next week on October 1st.
And if you think of other questions and you want to attend again on October 1st, it will be the same presentation, but Bob and I will both be available to take additional questions, and you can certainly email us at librarydecision2020@troypl.org. Well,
All right. Well,
I guess hearing none.
does that mean we win the town hall? We answered all the questions in less than the time allotted?
I think it does.
All right. Good job, Kathy. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this went well. If so, you can you can count on us doing it at least one more time next week. But I really think the City Council is eager to do more community engagement in this and other ways in the future. So thank you all for participating, and we'll wish you good night.
Good night. Thank you.